Demolition, and I'll open the floor to councillors for any questions. Councillor Wright.
It's not a question, it's a suggestion. For me, I believe that this item should lie on the table because I think it's complex. Where we've got to with this whole demolition, it's a complex thing and it's taken quite a long time for us to get there. And I think it would be absolutely beneficial for the new councillors to have an opportunity to catch up and for us to ask any questions. So my suggestion is that it lies on the table till the 19th of December and then we come back and make a decision.
You read my mind. Fabulous suggestion. I do wonder if we just take the opportunity while we're here with Richard and Paulina, if there are any specific questions, realising, of course, any other questions that come out over the next few weeks, I'm sure they're happy to take. But Councillor Taylor.
My first question is basically, is a delay going to have any impact?
No, I don't think so. It's really the as Paulina was indicating, it's really the longer the building sits there over time, it doesn't help anybody in terms of the transition to something new, making it a marketable proposition and also stopping kind of the dilapidated feel of that part. But there is nothing that we do not have, has to be done before Christmas kind of decision at all.
Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Just a question in light of what we're told this morning, is it dangerous sitting the way it is?
I'll have to defer to Malcolm perhaps on that one. It's beyond my expertise. Yeah.
There's no requirement to do anything. If it's been there for a time frame in which to remediate it, if that's what we wanted to do, potentially we could still be working on it. There was a decision for the staff to move out, but no, there's no requirement to do anything within a legislative time frame.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, when we got our business case a few weeks ago, there was no mention of the Robinson report in that at all, and I wondered why that was. Why wasn't it part of the detailed business case and informing us with that information?
So I guess it's the normal practice with that is that you would use the latest report that you had. It's not disparaging to Mr. Robertson's report, but it's unusual to include every single report on the same subject when you've got time, and the latest report is assumed to cover all the issues up to that moment. So that would include the issues that were there before. And I wasn't aware I don't think the CE was either, or anybody aware that it was a contentious issue, the Strata report at that particular time. So we took it at face value that was the latest thinking, and that formed part of the business case.
Just another question. We asked for that the Strata report had been peer reviewed, and we were sent a peer review of the library building this morning, but not the civic building. And I was wondering if you have that information, and if we could see it over the next couple of weeks. Are we going to be deferring this decision?
Yes, through the chair. My understanding about that is, so we tried to get what we could this overnight, I think it was. Councillor Brosnan had mentioned that to me yesterday. And in terms of that, at the time when we got the figures from Strata, we were particularly shocked at the library building, to be fair. So the focus went on making sure that building, which we thought was a lot better than 15%, so that came as a real shock. And the focus, it appears to have, when we go back now, drifted towards that particular building and peer reviewing that one, because that one was the one that created real alarm bells for us. Now we'll have to go back and see what the scope of the review was for you, and we'll dig up what we can over the next wee while.
I think Adele's got something to add to that.
And just through the mayor, so just at that time when we were undertaking both of the reviews, we were working with the Building Intelligence Group, who are our advisors on the project as well. So as part of that review, they were talking to Oricon about where we're at in conjunction with those DSA reviews. So they did do some high-level analysis for us because we didn't want to go into any decision at that point without having a good understanding of whether it was materially going to move. So that was the big question at the time for us. Given the 10 and 15%, the only difference in our decision would be that going above that 34, and so we were talking to Oricon about that at the time. The other piece of work that we undertook was a general costing of the building upgrades, because originally we had only planned to do an upgrade of the civic building, because that was the one that we really needed some work. Knowing that we needed earthquake strengthening across both buildings, we've got a costing, and that was around $75 million. So at $75 million and 11,000 square metres, when we knew that we could potentially fit into one building, was when we started to then focus on the library building. So I just wanted to clarify that. It would have been uneconomical to start to pursue a wider context in that regard. Given that, as you know, we're down to 3,500 squares at the moment, so we know we have the ability to do that. And we test fitted the library building as far as costing.
So this was based entirely on the strata report?
The strata report, as Richard mentioned earlier...
Sorry, Dale. Your Worship, now that we're live streaming, I'm conscious of the fact that no one watching this online can hear anything that Adele's saying in regard to the question. Could we ask if you could come up to the mic on the corner, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Adele.
Through the mayor. I'll try to remember everything I said. So obviously when we found out about the council buildings, it was quite a shock to us, and so we engaged the Building Intelligence Group, who are specialists. They were a company in Wellington and used to dealing with those who get impacted by these sorts of things, and specialists in buildings. So we started working with them and talking to them about whether or not undertaking a full review would be required, but also we started working with Oricon, who are specialists from Wellington around seismic strengthening. But as part of that conversation, we wanted to know if there was going to be any material variances away from the 10 and 15%. Anything above 34% would mean that we could potentially stay in those buildings. The information that we got back, from the initial discussion with them and the work that they reviewed, they said the answer from their perspective would be no. At the time, the two buildings are 11,000 square metres, and we started to look at then what the costings of those two buildings might be, and we were looking at about $75 million, which we deemed to be unaffordable for the city. We also then looked at whether we could fit into one building. So the library building is a good shape and size for us. Looking at an open plan environment, we could potentially get all staff back into the one building, so that's when we started to narrow our thinking at the time. So that was where we were focusing our efforts on a resolution. We were down to 3,500 square metres, although we've got some concessions as part of that, but that's where we're at. So the library building itself is 6,600 squares.
One thing that I'd also like to be sent out to all councillors now is the costings that was done around the refurbishment of the civic building, and taking on board the fact that it's not fit for purpose. So as a separate issue to the seismic issue, part of that decision-making process around choosing not to refurb. So I think that would be really useful to recirculate that, and of course send to the new councillors as well. So, did anyone else have any questions of the officers today? Councillor Brown.
I've just got more of a comment. I suppose because there's been some uncertainty put around our engineering reports that's come through. I think it's really important for the public that we're not seen to have gone shopping for an engineering report that meets what we want to achieve. So I think it's really important that in our paper, when it comes back, that there's mention of Graham's report, and then some information around what has changed and what where the discrepant or the changes are, and some validation around that, because I'm also quite conscious of the fact that the strata engineers aren't here to be able to speak to their report, so we've got an unevenness in terms of the information we're getting here today.
Very, very good point. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've got no specific questions to our staff. Thank you for your answers so far, and Adele, you're awesome. I just would like to take a moment to acknowledge Graham Robinson for coming in today and reinforcing his report with the standard of integrity that he holds himself to and his work that came through in his communication today. He did express that was quite a bit of a nerve-wracking experience. So as a result of your 5 minutes, we've now got an opportunity to have a closer look at this decision, which will have ongoing impact. So thank you for your time today, Graham, and I appreciate the courage and the opportunity to uphold the mana of your work. Kia ora.
Very good. So, Councillor Wright, did you want to move that this is
Yes,
made on the table?
I'm happy to move that it lie on the table till December the 19th.
Very good, I'll second that.
Everyone wants to get on it.
Gotta be quick.
Just not the building.
And did anyone want to speak to that in particular? Nothing really to speak to. So I'll put the motion.
Can I just say, yeah. I think that's a sensible decision. I think we could all agree today or next week or the week after that the council building, the civic building, is not fit for purpose. But I think if we're going to make a decision of this magnitude, if the civic building, and I'd like to quote here from Graham Robinson's report, if the civic building is to be demolished, then the decision should be made on good grounds from a fully informed position. And that, I hope, is what we'll be able to do when we next meet and discuss it. So, yeah.
Well said. Well said. I will therefore put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Item number 6, budgets to be carried forward to 2019-2020. And I'd invite Caroline to come and present the paper.
So the purpose of this paper is to seek council approval to carry forward unspent budgets from 18-19 into 19-20 and 2021. The total amount being requested to carry forward is 18.4 million. The majority of that relates to capital expenditure, 15.4 million, and that's mainly due to council completing only 24 million of the 41 million capital plan for 18-19. I'm just happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Do you have any questions? No. I mean, from my perspective, it was a good, clear report that clearly outlined why these budgets were being carried forward, and I guess we all are appreciative of how large our capital program has been in recent years, so it's understandable that some of these are being carried forward. Do I have a mover? Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Papani. Would you wish to speak?
I'd just like to make the comment that this carry forward scenario seems to be a relatively regular, and maybe we need to really consider how big our capital program is each year, or what we think it should be, so that it's more, the expenditure is actually aligned with what we actually achieve.
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Nice work.
If there's no one else that wishes to speak to the paper, I'll move the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 7, quarterly report for the 3 months ended 30th September, which is Caroline again.
Right, so we are reporting for the quarter ended 30th September, which is our first quarter of our financial year, a $1.2 million operating deficit. This is $174,000 unfavourable to the budget for that quarter. The operational expenditure was $1 million above budget, mainly due to higher than budgeted depreciation costs, and that's due to an uplift in our asset value from a unplanned revaluation last year, and also a timing variance relating to funding for the aquarium expansion project. Those overspends are offset by, or partially offset by, additional financial contributions revenue received, and the labour expenditure being lower than budget due to vacancies. and then also noting that the previous item, which you've just approved, carry forwards, they are not included in the budgeted figures for this quarterly report. So once they are input, it will improve our actual budget position.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions of Caroline? Do I have a mover? Councillor Topany, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Topany?
No, fantastic work again.
Tried this twice in a row now.
I know. New tune, new practices.
Beat it more often. Just thank you for making those numbers work.
And one thing that came out in the commentary that I thought was worth mentioning and celebrating as a council is that here in Napier we are now above the national average for enrolments in terms of voting enrolments, and in particular for the younger voters, with 74% compared to a national average of 61% for our 18 to 24 year olds, and 82% compared to 72% for 25 to 29 year olds, which I thought was fantastic.
Could I just add they all voted for the right people?
No bias at all.
And I also wanted to note and say a huge congratulations to our customer services team, who were ranked 5th out of 78 councils for customer experience in 2019. So I wanted to offer that congratulations to that team. Thank you. So I will now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Madam Chair, member of the public, I received my agenda yesterday and I don't have included in the quarterly report of the treatment.
It's a separate document, and yes. Right, if we now move to agenda item 9, because we've already discussed 8, the Napier City Council and Napier City Business Inc. events paper, which, welcome, Claire will talk to for us.
Could we get some clarity on Councillor Brown's participation in this conversation with her declaration, please?
I don't, it is up to you whether you think you need to leave the room for the discussion, but
I would, my association with the Napier City Business Inc. is quite at arm's reach, but I just, from a public perception, is mainly the reason I'm declaring the conflict. So I'll just sit back. How about that?
Very good.
No coughing or gesturing.
Yeah, or raised eyebrows.
The eyebrows.
My poker face.
Tēnā koutou I tēnei ahi. Your Worship, Mayor, Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to bring this paper to you today. Events add to city vibrancy and are typically well attended by all sectors of the community. Supplementing events with street food, which provides a cheap and quick meal for families, is an essential part of this experience. This paper seeks the support of Council to allow the trading of food and drink in identified public places of the CBD that occurs as part of events held by Napier City Council, Napier City Business Inc. and the Art Deco Trust. The resolution sought would allow this trading to occur at up to 18 events per year up until the 31st of October 2022, subject to a set of criteria recommended to ensure fairness to bricks and mortar operations and to ensure sufficient control can be exercised. This resolution would extend a resolution made in February of this year that allowed trading at events managed by Napier City Council or Napier City Business Inc. To include events also managed by the Art Deco Trust. The Trading in Public Places Bylaw 2014 prohibits trading in public places within the CBD without a specific resolution of Council to allow it. This resolution would enable these organisations to operate their popular central city events without seeking a resolution of council for every event.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Brown, Brown and Crown. Kia ora, Fleur. Firstly, I just wanted to say that I think that this makes a heck of a lot of sense with the limited understanding that I have around the kind of administration time that it takes to get these things ticked off. This makes a heck of a lot of sense. My question is around the recommendation A.7. I just wondered why Dickens Street isn't included in that, since it's part of that kind of CBD in the city area.
Through you, Mayor. Essentially, this was because we didn't really have that many events held within that street. I would obviously be happy to extend it to that street. But we haven't had any demand for events to occur within that street, and so it was really, that was my reason for not putting it forward. But again, happy to extend it.
Just from a future-proofing thing, if it's going to be for
Absolutely.
that time period, then to me it would make sense.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to amend that.
Right. Councillor Moe.
Yes, this is great. It sounds really exciting and interesting. Just a couple of things. I'm glad to see that the joint alcohol policy will be carefully followed, so that ticks an important box for me. But also I wondered, without involving a lot of extra expense or anything, but could we have recycling facilities available, or a couple of bins, just to show that we are supporting and promoting, our own waste management plan really in that way as part of any of these events?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So this is obviously outside of the scope of this request. However, we are always looking for ways to improve these events, particularly around waste minimisation and reduction. And so we work really closely, particularly with Cam's team, so Cameron Burton's team, around how we can deliver these across the city. So it's certainly something that's front of mind for the City Council and for those events in the city that we support.
Thank you. Councillor Tuffany. And then Councillor McGrath.
Thank you for that. So just could you build on that last statement around recycling being front of mind as we go forward? Because I'm conscious that in the last triennium there are at least four opportunities where council has asked for a greater focus on event holders, not necessarily what we do we're part of the solution, but for event holders to take more ownership and responsibility in what waste, or I guess products, they invite into that space with their community participants, and then how they manage what's left in that space. So, because I note down here in that same officer's recommendation number 10, we list food, we list the sale of alcohol, but I'm looking for confidence around where in here we're also signalling to these event holders that they have an obligation to protect our environment as well. So it's great. I'm looking for a bit of elaboration, please.
Yes, certainly, through you, Madam Chair. Again, outside the scope of this, but I can talk to this as much as I can. So we've been having ongoing discussions with our events manager, Kevin Murphy, and he was here earlier in the meeting. Cool.
You're doing well, I reckon.
And I wonder whether actually Kevin might be able to provide some supporting commentary on that matter.
Sure.
Welcome.
It is an ongoing sort of challenge, I think, around the whole waste management at events in general. But there are certainly a lot of councils that have started insisting on stall holders that they do look at how they can have products that are not going to be plastic, for example. And some of those conversations are just starting, to be fair. And I think Art Deco, Garth was here earlier, I think they're starting that conversation with their stall holders at Art Deco weekend. So I think, we've just got to have a conversation and work out how we do it.
Can I talk on that? Absolutely.
I work for a company that supplies a lot of these food holders with their packaging.
So I know for a fact that a lot of them have changed to compostables. The majority are changed to compostables, but there's nowhere to compost.
That's the issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're doing their bit, and it costs them. Their costs have gone up significantly to provide those compostable elements, because a lot of the events they go to, farmers market, it is compulsory, so they are doing it. But at the end of the day, they're going in the landfill.
And I'm aware of all of those background issues, and that's why it's something that we have to really think about how we deliver it. It's a great concept to say that we want to move to where Api's talking, but it's how we actually do it practically, where we know the end result is actually going to be what we want.
Councillor McGrath.
I see this as an opportunity for council. We talk about leading the way. We're talking about everyone else doing it. Is there somewhere in here, and we can think over a little bit of time, how we can lead this? How we might have the solution to it?
Well, the compostable discussion is like, where does it end up going to be compost? And from what I believe, it's some of the products are not breaking down as quickly as what some of the suppliers that have those facilities would like, and so there have been some facilities that haven't continued to take some of those compostable products. So that ends up being a lot wider discussion than us just saying you've got to use compostable, because if it ends up not going to where we want it to go to do the job.
Well, I'm meaning even like the recyclables, like the Coke can or something. There's an opportunity for council to be in this space and say, hey, look, we support recycling, do it this way, and then we're actually leading it and setting an example.
I mean, we've had Closed Loop, who are one company in Hastings that have started to be quite active in the event sort of sector, and some event organisers have actually paid quite a reasonable amount to stand at bins to make sure that companies, that the public actually put their products into the right bins, and then they do they make sure that it all gets split up properly and that it goes to the right places at the end of it. So it is something that we could possibly have more of a role in. It's a matter of how that's going to happen. At the moment, we're not quite there.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think it's worth teasing out a point that Kevin's just made in terms of identifying what our role might be in that space. Certainly our WMP talks about promoting better product stewardship with events in and around Napier, and potentially our ability to influence that is greater when they might be using a venue of ours. I think that the opportunities are more than just around whether a product is compostable or not. Obviously there's some really good points why that is a challenge at the moment, but separating out those recyclable products from waste products is probably a much easier opportunity. Glass, cardboard, plastic drink glasses are obviously a big challenge in that space. The other element that I'd just like to add to that conversation is that while yes, we could be leaders in that space, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should pay for the service. So trying to pull back to perhaps a more high-level strategic point of view, maybe that's where we need to identify where all of the opportunities lie, and potentially where or the challenges or difficulties with implementing some of those opportunities are, and where those costs might fall, as opposed to diving right into the detail right now. I think the conversation is great in terms of that's our ideal, that's our goal and our desire. Actually making it happen without it impacting directly on every ratepayer in Napier is the tough bit. We can advocate for the right direction, but potentially at some point who pays is a really key question.
Yeah, and I mean the event sector in Hawke's Bay, we have a event managers network that get together twice a year, and for the last 2 meetings the whole challenge of waste at events has been a topic, and we've had various suppliers come in and talk to us. So everyone's got a willingness of making sure that they can improve. It's a matter of how some of that actually physically happens.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Your Worship. So between the two of you, I got exactly the answer I was after. Thank you very much. And that is that the problem is bigger than just 1 or 2 items, and it does need an ongoing conversation as well as resourcing. But the reason why I bring the question up here is because part of this paper is around allowing events to continue without having to check back with this council. And so while I have great trust in our staff, I point out the fact that we talk about food and alcohol, but we don't talk about even indicating an expectation around ongoing conversations and how we reduce our footprint within Napier around events. So I'm not asking that we look for the golden bullet today. I'm just asking that we signal within this paper to those people who are operating events in our spaces that we will continue to work with them to transition to a better space.
Can I make a suggestion that rather than it being part of the paper per se, that we have an action in here that council officers communicate with the event holders that this is our expectations around waste management.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sounds great.
Councillor Price.
Just make mention that this is an issuing of several special licences over a long period. Would that be right?
Liquor licences.
Liquor licences? For every event.
You've really only got a handful of events in there that have got any special licence applications, but we're not approving the liquor licence applications at this.
Well, it says you've got to abide by it.
Yes, so you still need to apply for the
special liquor licences for every venue.
This is just for the training in public places bylaw.
Yeah, no, just reading the
no, they still need to.
Seems like quite a...
No.
Every venue.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor McGrath and then Councillor Simpson.
Just section 3, trading must occur or only occur within the street reserve, not on reserved land. A sound shell, what's that considered? In some of the areas up along the parade, if we were to...
Yep.
Are they street reserve or are they reserved land?
No, through you, Madam Chair, that's reserved land.
So we wouldn't be able to have people set up in the sound shell?
I've had a conversation with the reserves manager, and she would like to, on a case-by-case, consider those applications rather than have it go through with this.
So that doesn't rule it out then?
It certainly doesn't rule it out. It's just that it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. Yep.
Councillor Simpson.
Through you, Madam Chair. I wasn't present in February when this was passed, and I certainly wasn't present up until before October. My question would be, was there a reporting back? You're talking 18 events in public spaces with a range of licences engaged. Is there a report back loop to provide confidence to council that this decision has been appropriate and should continue?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, we didn't report back to council on the success of that resolution and the benefits that it brought to the city. However, I can inform you now that there weren't any concerns raised over that time, and it did allow events to happen within the city centre without having to go through a report to council each time, such as what would typically have to happen under the bylaw. So whether that's something that we could consider in the future.
It is really just streamlining the process. That's really what we're doing.
So, is it possible, because I actually appreciated Councillor Simpson's question, is there an element of reporting that could be provided to council that might fit within our quarterly reports, or another mechanism rather than what you've identified can be quite an onerous task if it's an event by event process, but if there is a summary every quarter, every half year, there does, I feel, need to be a feedback mechanism into this, because we are in effect broadening the scope and powers of some of how we operate. So I'd love to see the ability to have balance and checks in place.
You're not actually talking a lot of events, though, to be fair.
Events aside, it's about that feedback loop. There's value in a feedback loop.
Yeah, and I think perhaps just a summary in the quarterly report even saying there were 3 events. No problems. Richard over there, yes?
As a suggestion, perhaps we could do it by exception. So if there is something that is not working, that we report that back to council. Otherwise, let them go, because otherwise it becomes quite onerous actually having to try and work out what does reporting actually mean. But we know when it goes wrong that you want to know. With I think. So if we could do it by section and then have the feedback loop with the people that are asking for it.
So that's the start of a feedback mechanism, and it's a great place to start. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Is there any further questions for Councillor? Do I have someone to move the motion? Councillor Wright, thank you.
Was there an earlier amendment in there as well, with the amendment?
For the extension to include Dickens Street? Yes, that's correct.
Falling on the flyer in here.
Excellent. Seconder, Councillor Crown. Would you wish to speak to the motion?
No, I think it is a sensible motion, and I do appreciate the feedback comment, and I think that it is absolutely sensible to report back if something goes wrong and we need to hear about it. So I'm quite happy. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Crown? Councillor Brodman?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to speak in support of the motion. I was really pleased to see a number of councillors raise the point that I always raise with you, Fleur, around waste-free events when we talk about these kinds of issues in our CBD. I was forming up kind of in my head something around traders needing to be conscious of the WMMP goals around waste-free events, but quite happy to support the motion as it stands with the inclusion of that action that our I'm sure ever-changing recommendations to vendors in this space will be communicated to them when they go through this process. Thank you.
There being no further speakers, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now, agenda item 10. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10 is another new addition to our meetings, whereby we follow up on actions from previous meetings. So obviously, I'm not sure if Devorah wishes to come and answer any potential questions.
Welcome back to the table, Councillor Wayne.
It's wonderful to be here.
So if anyone did have any specific questions on the 4 action points that we have on here, bearing in mind one has been completed, I will open the floor. Councillor Taylor.
I was just going to, I don't know how far you've got with the Sport Hawke's Bay Council, but I have a Sport Hawke's Bay Trust Board meeting tomorrow, which I was going to raise that matter over the Constitution.
Fantastic, thank you.
Excellent. And no doubt you will just keep us updated on the status of the items on here. Thank you. And then lastly,
through you, Madam Mayor, apologies for interruption, but does the general layout of, because obviously that's a fairly new type of report for us, does the general layout suit the council, or are there any tweaks to that you'd like to see? It will be a rolling report through to council meetings. Yeah.
Perhaps a reference to what meeting it came from.
Sorry, that should be in there. Yeah.
Or just council.
Yeah. And you'll see, if I may, Madam Mayor, at this point we're anticipating that this particular report will come through to council meetings, but the type of meeting, it will pick up actions that may have been raised in the standing committees along the way.
Great.
So you will see those distinctions as those are raised in committees next year.
So.
Works.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool.
You're not doing anything with it? Okay, so we will need a mover and seconder and to vote on it, just to note that. So Councillor Tuffany and Councillor Bogue, thank you very much.
Is this public excluded?
No, this is just to move that we note that we've discussed the actions report.
Yeah.
So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And then we do just have our last open agenda item, which is minor matters, and Deputy Mayor Brosnan. I keep changing whether I call you councillor or deputy mayor, sorry.
I'll take both.
You were wishing to update us on Waipati.
Yeah, so just a very quick update for council that Councillor Price and I met this morning with Debbie Monaghan, Tanya Kerr, and Angela Tremaine. They are working on a project and have been for a number of years in partnership with HDC on the Waipataki Valley, and working on the biodiversity out there. And it was just a flag for council that we've asked them to possibly come and talk to us at some stage about that. And they, I think there is some scope in that for us to feed in with our biodiversity corridors in time, and possibly an overarching banner to come back to council to manage environmental projects. So there's a bit of work happening in that space, and just wanted to flag that early with council.
Okay, sounds good. I now declare the open meeting closed, and can I have mover and seconder to go into public excluded? Councillor Bogue, Councillor Brown. Thank you everyone, and thank you everyone for your active participation. Some great debates and discussion, and thought that I personally thoroughly enjoyed it.
So thank you.
I'll have to apply to my wife to replace the banana I stole to keep it sugar.
Good to see you, John.